For many people, Candyman is a horror film that still haunts them today. The film is set in Chicago and it's actually based on a real life story. Dometi Pongo, our Chicago guy, hosts the 6 episode podcast, Candyman, the true story behind the bathroom mirror murder. Thank you so much for your time today. Great to see you.
And always great to see you, man. How's it going?
It's going great. This is one of those times, it's Halloween. This might be the movie that finds everybody that they want to go ahead and rewatch, but there's a deeper story to this. Tell us a little bit about the podcast.
It is. It's a deep story to it, and it definitely coincides with Halloween. Candyman has always been that cult classic. We grew up with it. The whole lore around, you say Candyman's name 5 times in the bathroom mirror, and this supernatural ghost appears. But there's this backstory that, in part, inspired the film. So the official, I guess, inspiration for the film is this book, this short story by Clive Barker called The Forbidden. But there's this hidden piece of Chicago history that actually inspired it. It was the murder of a woman named Ruthie Mae McCoy. She was a 52-year-old grandmother who called the police and said that someone was trying to climb into her apartment through her bathroom mirror, right? So as crazy as that sounds, the dispatcher didn't actually register what she was saying and registered the call as a disturbance instead of a robbery. So when the police actually come to the scene, they don't take it as seriously as they should. We get into the details of this in the podcast, but the short version is the police come, they don't break down the door to check on her for well-being check, they leave. Other neighbors call the police and report shots fired, yet the police take 2 days to come back to the crime scene. It actually took for her neighbor to go and get the building's manager and ask them to break down the door, open the door, do something to check on her friend. And eventually, the story unfolds into a saga about how do we even end up in a situation where people are able to climb through a bathroom mirror, all the way through this issue of just apathy when it comes to policing communities of color.
I mean, obviously, so many issues, between housing and the law enforcement and mental health that are taking place here. Were you surprised by all these things, or does it kind of seem like something we kind of know in Chicago that is kind of going on, and this just kind of brings it more to the forefront?
I was definitely surprised. I didn't know, I spent, this is a movie that we grew up with. So I spent 30 some odd years. And actually, to be honest with you, Rui, I say it on the podcast, but it's the absolute truth. I didn't watch the movie in full from beginning to end until it was time for me to do this podcast. So I was that scared of the movie. And so I didn't even imagine that there was any literal real life touch points for the film. I did know that it was set in Cabrini Green. I did know, there was some Chicago connections, but no, not in a million years did I think that there was a real story attached to this. And like most stories that involve Chicago being a deeply segregated city, there are all these other tentacles, these other conversations that lead us down this rabbit hole of how could this happen to somebody? And, we kind of unpack that.
But it's also different because now, when you drive down Division Street, there's a Target, the neighborhood is gentrified. It's a lot different than what was going on, but your mind always thinks like, this is where the story kind of originated.
Yeah, you know what I loved about the 2021 Candyman, the one executive produced and co-written by Jordan Peele and directed by Nia DaCosta, is they kind of touch on the gentrification, how the neighborhood has changed. The new Candyman character is dealing with this idea that the things that he loved around this Cabrini Green area now looks totally different. And you're exactly right. That whole neighborhood has changed. One of the guests on the show is Chicago urban historian Dilla, and State's Attorney Kim Fox is a guest as well. And she grew up in Cabrini Green. And she talks about this interesting dichotomy between understanding that the area you grew up in had its challenges, had its violent elements, but also knowing that these exaggerated stereotypes ended up turning into how people view Black communities writ large. And she has such a close affinity with that neighborhood. She tells me a story about going back to the site and taking a brick from the demolition, and she still has that brick to this day in her office. So it's such this complicated, rich history where we love these neighborhoods that we come from, and we just wish that the resources that have suddenly become available now that edifice is gone, if only those resources were available when Black folks lived in the exact same area.
Yeah, and I mean that's a whole nother, 10-hour conversation, and that would only just kind of scrape the surface of some of those issues. I want to talk a little bit about working with 48 hours on this. Every time I talk to you, you have a brand new project. You're always working on something exciting. But talk a little bit about this project and working with 48 hours.
My first entry point into the Paramount system and MTV was True Life Crime. And, throughout my whole life, in my career in journalism, I never knew that I would end up in the true crime space. But if you end up in the true crime space, I don't know if there's a show that is more quintessentially the formula for how to do this kind of storytelling correctly than 48 hours. So, when this idea came to me, and it actually came to me, Rudy, in 2021. So it took us 3 years to actually bring this story to life. And, it's been a joy working with Judy Tygard and Megan Marcus and the whole team over there at 48 Hours and the podcast team. It's a dream come true because literally, I went from, WVON in Chicago to WGN to now being on one of those shows that was just on in the background at home on Channel 2 when my mom is, just watching the TV. It's kind of surreal to finally meet Peter Van Zandt and have Erin Moriarty, who hosts 48 Hours, pull me to the side for conversations and tell me that she's a fan of my work. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, we grew up in a similar household. That was my mom's favorite show growing up, and I remember, I get to watch my shows, and we watched 48 Hours together, as well too. That's so interesting.
Right. It's historic, man. It's historic, and they know what it takes to tell a compelling true crime story, but they also have the resources to do it well. Like she has a podcast out right now, Murder in the Orange Grove, where it's a case that she's been following on and off for like the past 20, 25 years. Right. Like that is how rich the history of that show is. And she has been on that show since its inception in the late 80s. And so, just having access to that kind of wisdom and the conversations we can have about how we can improve the storytelling, and then even getting a chance to be candid with the 48 Hours team about the importance of diverse storytelling, telling stories about communities that don't look like mainstream America, which is why her show is also focusing on a wrongly convicted African-American man. So it's just incredible to see the growth of that franchise, but then also be part of it in some small way.
No, that is wonderful. Watching the movie Candyman, whether it was the original or the new version that we just had a couple of years ago, do you view those differently after recording the podcast, after kind of delving deeper into the story?
Very much so. We had a professor, a media study scholar by the name of Robin Means Coleman, Dr. Coleman, who broke down, when I watch Candyman, there's sometimes these stereotypes or tropes that you see in films, even films that we enjoy, where you can't put your finger on why certain elements rubbed you the wrong way, or why just intrinsically, instinctually, just as a Black person watching a film or person of color watching certain content, you can enjoy it and still see the problematic aspects of it. And so after doing this podcast, we went back through this history in film, and we talk about this in the podcast, where there are different tropes, like the Black boogeyman trope, where, we see this trope in movies like Planet of the Apes, which the apes end up being a proxy for people of color in this interesting way. Or going back to what is considered the earliest motion picture, Birth of a Nation, which is a film that depicts a white man in blackface who's supposed to be a Black man who is sexually assaulting this white woman and chasing after her. And in Candyman, the Candyman is this Black boogeyman who is chasing after this white woman. And even though the backstory for the Candyman is that he was lynched by a racist mob, he hunts the projects. So if you're lynched by a racist mob, why are you hunting and terrorizing the people who look like you, right? And so we end up finding out that the film was written and directed by a white man in the UK. So there are these cultural nuances that he kind of misses. We had this candid conversation with him, not to denigrate him or anything, but just talking about how this film has become so important that it's become larger than him and what he intended. And Robin Means Coleman helped me to dissect that. And the great thing about the new Candyman is that it takes some of those tropes and turns it on its head. So at the end, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the new Candyman, at the end, he ends up killing the police officers that kill him, the new Candyman, right? So now he becomes a figure of protection rather than one of victimization. And so there are these full circle moments that made me appreciate what the conversation the first film started and the conversation that the second film addresses.
And then are all six out currently, or are we going week by week, or when are the?
Oh yeah, we're going week by week. I believe we're on episode 3 right now. They drop every Thursday. If you're a Wondery Plus or a 48 Hours Plus subscriber, you get the episodes a week early. The finale comes on for subscribers on Halloween. And for everyone else a week after. So every Thursday, check it out on wherever you get your podcast. You can also jump on YouTube. And I got to tell your viewers this, comment definitely helps. All feedback is good feedback, and let us know what you think of it and what stories you think we should dig into next.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. And then final thing here, coming back home for the holidays, any big plans to come back to Chicago? It's always a wonderful time of year around the holiday season. All that stuff's kind of kicking off now.
Yeah, I got to come back to the crib. I'll be in New York. I've been in New York too long, man. I actually want to do a dinner and invite some friends, and I'll definitely send you an invite if I'm able to make it happen. I want to do a dinner and kind of do like an early screening of that last episode, maybe the week after Halloween. So just a few weeks here. So hopefully I can do that, invite some family, and really just talk about the work and share stories and fellowship, man. I'm looking forward to the holidays.
Awesome. I'm going to keep my calendar open because I'm going to make sure to make that.
All right, I'm dead serious, man. Hopefully I can pull it together in time, and I'll sure to get that invitation to you, bro.
Awesome. Always great, so great to chat with you, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for the headliner. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you.